The sun was setting over Interstate 70 when 5 Harley-Davidsons thundered into the parking lot of the Crossroads Diner. Their chrome pipes gleamed orange in the fading light, and the roar of their engines made the windows vibrate. Inside, conversation died as heads turned toward the entrance. All except for one. Marcus Chin sat quietly at the counter, his weathered hands wrapped around a coffee mug that had seen better days. 22 years as a Marine Force recon instructor had taught him patience, and right now, that patience was telling him to keep stirring his coffee, keep his breathing steady, and wait. The bikers swagger in like they own the place, their leather cuts adorned with patches that speak of territory and trouble. The lead rider, a mountain of a man with a graying beard and knuckles that have seen more fights than a boxing ring, catches Marcus's reflection in the chrome napkin dispenser. Well, the leader's voice carries across the diner like rolling thunder. Looks like we found ourselves a real-life hero. He pronounces hero like it's a curse word, drawing snickers from his crew. The other patrons shift uncomfortably in their seats. Betty, the 60-year-old waitress who's worked here since Carter was president, clutches her order pad a little tighter. The cook peers through the service window, his spatula frozen mid-flip. Marcus takes another sip of his coffee, sets the cup down with deliberate care, and adjusts the Marine Corps pin on his worn denim jacket. His movements are unhurried, precise, the kind of precision that comes from years of training, and the kind of calm that comes from facing much worse than 5 bikers with more attitude than sense. They have no idea what they're walking into. And that's exactly how Marcus wants it. Have you ever witnessed someone pick the wrong target? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to follow for more tales of justice served. What do you think Marcus will do next? The lead biker plants his hands on the counter, deliberately invading Marcus's space. His leather cut creaks as he leans in, breath heavy with the smell of cheap cigarettes and cheaper whiskey. You deaf, old-timer? Or just stupid? Marcus sets his coffee down with a quiet clink. Each movement is measured, controlled, the kind of control that speaks of decades of discipline. Neither, he says, voice low but clear enough to carry across the now silent diner. Just enjoying my coffee. Well, that's the problem right there. The biker's yellowed teeth flash in what might be called a smile, if smiles were made of broken glass. See, this is our place now. And we got rules about who gets to enjoy anything here. Behind him, his crew spreads out in a practice formation. One blocks the door, another positions himself near the kitchen entrance. The remaining 2 hover near the center tables, making sure the other patrons stay put. An elderly couple clutches hands beneath their table. A trucker in the corner booth slowly reaches for his phone but stops when one of the bikers shifts his jacket, revealing the glint of something metallic at his waist. Betty, the waitress, begins to edge toward the phone behind the counter, but Marcus catches her eye and gives an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Not yet. The situation is balanced on a knife's edge, and one wrong move could send it spiraling. Rules, huh? Marcus takes another sip of his coffee, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to the mounting tension. Funny thing about rules, they tend to change when the right person comes along. The lead biker's face darkens. He reaches out and knocks Marcus's coffee cup aside, sending it shattering against the wall. Coffee drips down the faded wallpaper like dark tears. That right? And I suppose you think you're the right person? What happens next occurs so quickly that later, when the security footage is reviewed, they'll have to slow it down to catch all the details. As the biker reaches for Marcus's collar, the retired Marine moves like liquid lightning. His left hand deflects the grab, while his right hand catches the biker's extended wrist. A simple pivot, a shift of weight, and suddenly the massive biker finds himself face down on the counter, arm locked behind him at an angle that screams submission. The other bikers freeze, caught between shock and rage. Their leader, cheek pressed against the Formica counter, lets out a grunt of pain and surprise. Marcus holds him there with seemingly no effort, as if they're merely having a casual conversation about the weather. Now, Marcus says, his voice still carrying that same calm tone, about those rules. The diner erupts into chaos. The remaining bikers surge forward, but Marcus's voice cuts through the commotion like a steel blade. I wouldn't, He applies slight pressure to their leader's arm, drawing a muffled curse. Your friend here might lose the use of his shoulder. Two of the bikers reach inside their jackets, but a new voice joins the fray. I wouldn't do that either. It's the cook, Stan, now visible in the service window with a shotgun trained on the group. His hands are steady, eyes hard. Already called the state police. They're 10 minutes out. The leader, still pinned, spits out words through gritted teeth. You have no idea what you're starting, old man. We're the devil's outcasts. We own 3 counties. When our brothers hear about this. When your brothers hear about what? Marcus interrupts, his voice taking on an edge that makes even the toughest biker pause. About how 5 of you couldn't handle one old Marine. About how you came in here threatening people just trying to enjoy their dinner. He leans closer to the leader's ear. Or about how you're about to leave, quietly, and never come back. The silence that follows is thick enough to cut. One of the bikers, younger than the rest, shifts nervously. Boss, maybe we should. Shut up, the leader snarls, but fear has crept into his voice. Marcus's grip hasn't wavered, and the position is becoming increasingly painful. Outside, a semi-truck pulls into the lot, its air brakes hissing like a warning. Through the windows, more trucks become visible, forming a wall of steel around the bikers' motorcycles. The truckers who regularly stop at Crossroads have their own informal network, and word travels fast when one of their favorite diners is in trouble. Marcus notes the arrival with satisfaction, but keeps his focus on the immediate threat. Here's what's going to happen, he says, voice pitched so everyone can hear. You're going to leave. You're going to forget about this place. Because if you don't, the next time won't be just me. It'll be every trucker who passes through, every local who's sick of being intimidated, and every cop in 3 states who's been waiting for an excuse to look closer at your operation. He releases the leader with a subtle push, stepping back to give him space to stand. The biker straightens up slowly, rubbing his shoulder, his face a storm of humiliation and rage. But there's something else there too, a glimmer of uncertainty. For the first time, he's wondering if he's miscalculated. The sound of distant sirens filters through the evening air. The younger biker edges toward the door. Boss, those cops are getting close. The leader's eyes dart around the diner, to Stan's unwavering shotgun, to the wall of trucks outside, to Marcus's steady gaze. His next words come out like they're being dragged over broken glass. We're leaving. For now. The bikers back toward the door, maintaining what dignity they can muster. Their leader, last to leave, pauses in the doorway. This ain't over, he growls, but the threat sounds hollow against the backdrop of approaching sirens and idling trucks. Marcus doesn't respond. He simply walks over to the shattered coffee cup, kneels down, and begins picking up the pieces. Betty hurries over with a rag and dustpan, her hands still shaking. Marcus, you shouldn't let me do that. It's all right, Betty, he says softly. Been cleaning up messes a long time. He looks up at her with a gentle smile that belies the steel in his eyes. Though you might want to brew a fresh pot. Something tells me we're about to have company. Outside, the bikers mount their motorcycles, their usual thunderous departure muted by the wall of semi-trucks. The truckers stand in loose groups, arms crossed, watching silently as the gang weaves through the impromptu blockade. Some take photos with their phones, insurance against future trouble. Inside, the diner slowly comes back to life. The elderly couple clasps Marcus's hand as they leave, insisting on paying for his coffee. The trucker who'd reached for his phone earlier approaches, introducing himself as Mike. Those guys have been causing trouble up and down I-70 for months, he says, pulling out a notebook. Mind if I get your number? Might need to call on you if they try something at other stops. Stan emerges from the kitchen, shotgun now safely stowed away. He's worked here for 20 years and never had to touch it before. Should have done something about them weeks ago, he mutters, but there's respect in his eyes when he looks at Marcus. As the state police cars finally pull into the lot, lights flashing, Marcus settles back onto his stool. Betty places a fresh cup of coffee in front of him, in a new mug, steam rising like a promise. But his eyes are on the window, watching the distant taillights of the retreating bikers. He's been in enough conflicts to know that wounded pride is more dangerous than any weapon. The Devil's outcasts wouldn't take this humiliation lying down. They'd return, with more men, more weapons, and a burning desire for revenge. Marcus takes a sip of his coffee, considering the variables, the potential outcomes. The diner had become more than just his favorite spot for evening coffee. It was now a battleground, and he had just drawn the first line in the sand. 2 truckers enter, cell phones in hand, already talking about spreading the word to other stops along the interstate. The elderly couple lingers in their car, waiting to give statements to the police. Stan checks his shotgun's action, mechanical clicks echoing in the kitchen. And Betty keeps glancing at the door, torn between fear of what might come through it next and faith in the quiet Marine who'd stood his ground. Marcus knows what's coming. The real fight hasn't even started yet. But as he watches the diner's regulars supporting each other, sharing information, standing together, he realizes that maybe that's exactly what this place needed. Someone to show them that standing up wasn't just possible, it was necessary. Word spreads fast in small towns along interstate highways. By sunrise, every diner, truck stop, and gas station within 100 miles is buzzing with talk of the Marine who stood up to the Devil's outcasts. The story grows with each telling. Some say Marcus took down all 5 bikers single-handedly. Others swear he disarmed a knife-wielding attacker with nothing but a coffee spoon. Marcus keeps to his routine, arriving at the Crossroads Diner each evening as the sun sets. But things have changed. Truckers time their routes to stop by during his visits. Local veterans appear, sitting nearby, nodding respectfully. Even the high school wrestling coach drops in, hoping to glean some wisdom about handling confrontations. On this particular evening, a familiar face walks through the door. Captain Sarah Martinez, retired Force Recon, now working as a private security consultant. She spots Marcus and slides onto the next stool, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "Heard you're making friends," she says, ordering coffee. "Caught wind of it down in Texas. Devil's outcasts aren't just some local nuisance, Chin. They've got chapters in 3 states, connections to drug trafficking, weapon smuggling. You kicked a hornet's nest." Marcus stirs his coffee, watching the cream create swirling patterns. "Wasn't looking for trouble, Sarah. Trouble found you anyway." She pulls out her phone, showing him surveillance photos of bikers gathering at a compound 50 miles south. "They're calling in favors. I counted 30 bikes yesterday. More arriving today." She pockets the phone, her expression serious. "I made some calls. Got 8 former Force Recon operators within driving distance. They're ready to help if you want them." Before Marcus can respond, the diner's door chimes. Tom Wheeler, the local sheriff, enters with his deputy. They take seats nearby, ordering coffee and pie. Wheeler's voice is low but carries clearly. "Got 3 state police units assigned to patrol this stretch. FBI's interested too. Seems your biker friends have been on their radar." Marcus absorbs this information, his face betraying nothing. But inside, his tactical mind is already analyzing angles, resources, potential scenarios. The situation has grown beyond a simple diner confrontation. It's becoming a full-scale operation. Betty approaches with fresh coffee, but her usual warm smile is tinged with worry. "Marcus, I've been thinking. My brother owns a security company in Kansas City. He's already offered to install cameras, maybe post a few guards." "That won't be necessary," Marcus interrupts gently. "But thank you, Betty." He gestures around the diner, where truckers, veterans, and locals sit in strategic positions near windows and exits. "We've got plenty of eyes already." Sarah watches this exchange with interest. "They're not just customers anymore, are they? You've been organizing them." Marcus takes another sip of coffee, just giving people the confidence to do what they already wanted to do. Every person in here has been pushed around by those bikers at some point. They were just waiting for someone to show them it wasn't hopeless. As if on cue, Mike the trucker approaches with his laptop. "Got something you should see," he says, opening it to reveal a digital map marked with reds. Each represents a truck stop or diner where the outcasts have caused trouble. Been collecting reports from drivers all over the region. They've got a pattern: start small, intimidate the staff, drive away regular customers, then use the place for their business. Sheriff Wheeler leans in, studying the map. That matches our intelligence. They've been setting up distribution points along major trucking routes. Smart, using the legitimate traffic as cover. He straightens up, adjusting his gun belt. But they've never faced organized resistance before. The diner's door opens again, admitting a tall woman in business casual attire. Lisa Chun, Marcus's daughter, strides in with purpose, her FBI badge glinting at her hip. She takes in the gathering with a practiced eye before focusing on her father. "Dad," she says, her tone professional but underlaid with concern. "Got your message. Brought some files you should see." She places a thick folder on the counter. The outcasts aren't just angry about the humiliation. This diner sits at a strategic crossroads for their operation. They can't afford to let it stay independent. Marcus flips through the files, his expression unchanging. But Sarah, who served with him for years, recognizes the subtle tightening around his eyes. The stakes have just gotten higher. "They'll come at night," a new voice adds. Everyone turns to see Stan, the cook, emerging from the kitchen. He wipes his hands on his apron, then pulls out his own phone. "Got this from my cousin in the state police." The screen shows thermal imaging of the bikers' compound, dozens of heat signatures moving with purpose. They're prepping for something big. Soon. The diner falls silent as the implications sink in. This isn't just about standing up to bullies anymore. It's about dismantling a criminal operation that has terrorized the region for years. And the Crossroads Diner, this humble establishment on the edge of nowhere, has become ground zero. A steady stream of vehicles begins arriving at the diner's back lot as the sun dips below the horizon. Pickup trucks with gun racks, unmarked police cars, and motorcycles belonging to veterans who still remember what it means to fight for something bigger than themselves. They gather in small groups, sharing information and resources. Sarah coordinates with her Force Recon contacts via encrypted channels, while Lisa works her FBI connections. The local ham radio operators, led by elderly Pete Wilson, who's been monitoring trucker channels for 40 years, set up a command center in his RV behind the diner. Even the high school's computer club gets involved, creating a secure messaging system for coordinating movements. "They think we're just a bunch of scared locals," Tom Henderson, a former Army Ranger turned mechanic, says as he checks over communication equipment. They don't realize half the veterans in 3 counties are combat engineers, signal specialists, and reconnaissance experts. Marcus watches it all from his usual spot, noting how naturally leadership roles emerge. Sarah handles tactical planning, Lisa coordinates with law enforcement, and Mike organizes the truckers into surveillance teams. The diner's regulars, civilians who've never seen combat, find their own ways to contribute. Betty's sister, a nurse at the local hospital, prepares medical supplies. The local hardware store owner quietly reinforces the diner's doors and windows. "You've built something here, Dad," Lisa says softly, joining him at the counter. "These people trust you. Are you sure you want to see this through? We could let the FBI handle it, set up a proper operation." Marcus looks around at the gathered faces, each carrying their own story of being pushed around by the outcasts. He sees determination replacing fear, community overcoming isolation. "Sometimes the system needs help from the ground up," he replies. "These people needed to know they could fight back. Now they do." A young trucker rushes in, breathing hard. "Just got word from a buddy at the truck stop in Miller's Creek. 30 bikes heading this way, maybe more behind them. They're calling in everyone they've got." Sarah checks her watch, then looks at Marcus. "Your call. We've got about 70 people ready to move, including law enforcement. Do we stand our ground here, or try to intercept them?" The diner falls silent, all eyes turning to Marcus. He stands slowly, his movements deliberate as always. "We defend what's ours," he says, voice carrying to every corner of the room. "But we do it smart. We do it right." He turns to the gathered crowd, and in his eyes they see not just the retired Marine, but a leader who understands that the coming battle is about more than just one diner or one gang. "They want to make an example of us?" He surveys the room, meeting each gaze in turn. "Let's give them an example they'll never forget." The night settles over the Crossroads Diner like a heavy blanket, broken only by the dim glow of parking lot lights and the occasional sweep of headlights from passing trucks. To anyone driving by, it looks like any other quiet evening, exactly as Marcus planned it. Pete's voice crackles over the secure radio channel. Thunder Group reports movement on Highway 16. Multiple bikes, running dark. 3 minutes out. Inside the diner, Marcus sits at his usual spot, coffee cup steaming. Betty works behind the counter, her movements practiced but tense. A few truckers occupy booths, apparently absorbed in their phones or meals. Nothing looks out of place, except for the subtle earpieces everyone wears and the reinforced windows that caught the last light of day with a slight tint. Sarah's voice comes through clear and low. Confirmed visual. 37 bikes, 3 support vehicles. Heavy weapons visible. Sorry, not trying to hide this time. Marcus takes another sip of coffee, his expression unchanging. Everyone hold positions. Let them make the first move. Remember, we're just citizens defending our diner. The rumble begins as a distant thunder, growing steadily until it fills the air. The Devil's Outcasts arrive like an invasion force, their bikes forming a semicircle around the diner's front entrance. Their leader, sporting fresh leather and a bandaged shoulder from his last visit, dismounts first. His face is a mask of cold fury as he strides toward the entrance. The door chimes pleasantly as they enter, the sound absurdly normal against the tension. 5 bikers follow their leader in, with more waiting outside. They're better armed this time, carrying themselves with the confidence of overwhelming numbers. "Evening, gentlemen," Betty calls out, her voice steady despite the fear Marcus can see in her eyes. "Coffee." The leader ignores her, focusing on Marcus. "Thought you'd be long gone by now, old man." His voice carries none of the casual mockery from their first encounter. Only cold, professional menace. Guess some folks need a harder lesson. Marcus sets down his coffee cup with deliberate care. "Still haven't learned to call ahead for reservations, I see." The leader's hand moves toward his jacket, but Marcus's voice cuts through the tension. "Before you do something stupid, you might want to look around." Red lasers suddenly appear on the chests of every biker in the diner. Through the windows, more dots dance across the leather jackets of those outside. Sarah's Force Recon team, positioned in overlooking buildings, has been waiting for this moment. "That's just the welcome party," Marcus continues, still not moving from his stool. "The FBI has your compound surrounded right now. State police are blocking every escape route in 3 counties. He takes another sip of coffee. "And those aren't regular truckers out there." The leader's eyes dart around, finally noticing what he should have seen earlier. The truckers in the booths are all combat veterans, their relaxed postures belying their readiness. The parking lot is strategically filled with vehicles, cutting off any quick escape routes. Even Betty has stepped back from the counter, giving clear lines of fire to the hidden security positions. "You're bluffing," the leader snarls, but uncertainty creeps into his voice. A new sound fills the air, helicopter rotors. Through the windows, police choppers become visible, their spotlights sweeping across the gathered bikes. Lisa's voice comes through clear on everyone's earpiece. "FBI teams in position. Green light for takedown." The leader's hand inches closer to his weapon. Marcus finally stands, his movement drawing all eyes. "You've got 2 choices," he says, voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Surrender now, face federal charges, maybe cut a deal. Or..." He leaves the alternative hanging in the air. One of the younger bikers breaks first, raising his hands and backing toward the door. Then another. The leader sees his advantage crumbling as his men realize they're caught in a trap. "This isn't over," he growls, but his hand moves away from his jacket. Marcus shakes his head. "Actually, it is. Because while you were focused on revenge, we were gathering evidence. Every drug route, every weapons cache, every corrupt official on your payroll. It's all documented." He nods toward the door. "FBI is waiting outside. I suggest you go quietly." The leader's face contorts with rage as realization dawns. This wasn't just about one Marine in a diner. It was a carefully orchestrated trap, months in the making. His organization's entire operation had been compromised while they focused on settling a personal score. "Take them," Lisa's voice commands through the radios. The diner erupts into controlled chaos. FBI tactical teams breach from multiple entry points, their movements precise and coordinated. Sarah's veterans emerge from their positions, weapons trained. The bikers outside find themselves surrounded by state police and federal agents who seemingly materialize from the shadows. But the leader isn't finished. With a roar of desperate fury, he lunges across the counter toward Betty, hoping to secure a hostage. Marcus moves like liquid lightning, intercepting him halfway. The two men crash into a booth, sending coffee cups shattering across the floor. This time, there's no quick submission hold or simple takedown. The leader fights with the desperate violence of a man seeing his empire crumble. He manages to land a solid punch to Marcus's ribs, drawing a grunt of pain. But Marcus absorbs the blow, using the leader's momentum against him. They grapple across the diner floor, knocking over chairs and tables. The leader pulls a hidden knife, its blade glinting in the fluorescent lights. Marcus catches his wrist just as the blade whispers past his ear. For a moment, they're locked in a deadly embrace, each straining for advantage. "Should have stayed away from my diner," Marcus says through gritted teeth. Then he shifts his weight, executes a perfect hip throw, and sends the leader crashing into his own men. The knife skitters across the floor, coming to rest at Betty's feet. The fight drains from the gang as they watch their leader laid out on the checkered linoleum. FBI agents move in with handcuffs, securing each biker with professional efficiency. Outside, more arrests are being made as the operation expands to include the support vehicles and reinforcements still en route. Sarah approaches Marcus, who's straightening his shirt with his usual calm demeanor. "You okay?" she asks, noting how he favors his left side. "Nothing Betty's coffee can't fix," he replies, but there's a grimness in his eyes. They both know this isn't over. The devil's outcasts of chapters and other states, allies who won't take this defeat lightly. As if reading their thoughts, Lisa joins them, holstering her weapon. "We got their leadership and most of the senior members. But there are still loose ends." She looks at her father. "They'll try to regroup, maybe seek revenge." Marcus retrieves his overturned coffee cup, examining it for cracks. Finding none, he places it back on the counter, where Betty's already waiting with the pot. "Let them try," he says quietly. "We'll be ready." Through the windows, red and blue lights paint the night in alternating patterns. The parking lot has become a processing center as more law enforcement arrives. But inside the diner, in that moment, there's just the quiet sound of coffee being poured and the sense that while one battle has been won, a larger war is just beginning. In the pre-dawn hours, after the last police car has departed and the evidence teams have finished their work, Marcus sits alone in the diner. The first hints of sunrise paint the eastern sky in shades of purple and gold, casting long shadows across the newly cleaned floor. Betty had insisted on staying to put everything back in order. Some habits run deeper than fear. His coffee has gone cold, but he barely notices. The adrenaline has long since faded, leaving behind an ache in his ribs and something deeper, more troubling in his mind. 22 years of training Marines had taught him to analyze every engagement, to learn from every confrontation. But this feels different. Sarah finds him there, sliding onto the next stool with the quiet grace of someone who understands the weight of victory. "You're thinking too hard," she says, not looking at him. "Wonder if we did the right thing," Marcus responds, his voice low. "Bringing all these people into it. Betty, the truckers, even the kids with their computers. We made them targets." "They were already targets," Sarah counters. "The outcasts would have taken over this place eventually, turned it into another hub for their operation. The only difference is now people know they can fight back." Marcus runs his finger along the rim of his cup, remembering the look in the young biker's eyes when he surrendered. Not just fear, but relief. How many of them joined up because they felt they had no choice? How many stayed because they were afraid? "You're not responsible for their choices," Sarah says, but they both know it's more complicated than that. Lisa arrives with fresh coffee and a medical kit, her FBI jacket draped over her arm. She begins cleaning the cut above her father's eye without asking permission. Got preliminary reports from the raids, she says. Found enough evidence to put their leadership away for decades. Drugs, weapons, trafficking operations, it was worse than we thought. And better organized, Marcus adds. They'll have contingencies. People we didn't catch. Resources we don't know about. The morning light strengthens, illuminating the scars of battle. A cracked window, scuff marks on the floor, a dent in the counter that will become part of the diner's story. But Marcus sees beyond the physical damage to the invisible lines that have been drawn. Marcus stands, wincing slightly at his bruised ribs, and walks to the window. The parking lot is empty now, but he can still see the phantom images of last night's battle, the coordinated movements of veterans and law enforcement, the faces of community members standing their ground, the moment when fear turned to resolve. When I retired, he says almost to himself, I thought I was done fighting other people's battles. Thought I could just exist, have my coffee, watch the sunset. He turns back to Sarah and Lisa. But maybe that's not who we are. Any of us. Lisa sets down the medical supplies, studying her father. You taught me something when I was young, remember? About why you became a Marine instructor instead of staying in combat roles. Marcus nods slowly. Teaching one person to defend themselves means teaching everyone they'll ever protect. Look what happened here, Lisa continues, gesturing around the diner. One act of standing up to bullies turned into an entire community finding its strength. The truckers organizing their own intelligence network, veterans using their skills to protect civilians, even Betty learning she's braver than she thought. Sarah stands, joining Marcus at the window. The outcasts aren't the only gang operating like this. All along the interstates, there are places like this diner, vulnerable spots where criminals build their networks, pressure the locals, expand their reach. And now those locals know it can be fought, Marcus concludes, seeing the bigger picture forming. They know they don't have to face it alone. A truck pulls into the lot, Stan arriving early to start breakfast prep. But he's not alone. Two other vehicles follow him in, and Marcus recognizes Mike the trucker and Tom Henderson, the former Army Ranger. They're carrying construction materials, clearly planning to help repair the damage from last night. They're not here because they have to be, Lisa observes. They're here because you showed them what's possible when people stand together. Marcus watches as more vehicles arrive, community members coming together without being asked. He feels the weight of his revelation settling onto his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a purpose. He hadn't chosen this role, but maybe it had chosen him. The outcasts will try to retaliate, he says, his tactical mind already working through scenarios. Not just here, but against anyone who helped us. They'll want to make an example, show other communities what happens when you resist. Sarah's expression hardens with determination. Then we'll need to be ready. Not just here, but everywhere they might strike. Build a network of our own. Through the window, the sunrise paints the sky in shades of promise and warning. Marcus sees his reflection overlaid against the gathering crowd outside. The retired Marine who thought he was done fighting, now standing at the crossroads of a much larger battle. Betty arrives with fresh coffee for everyone, her movements more confident than before. She pauses beside Marcus, looking out at the gathering crowd. My sister called, she says. Says the diner at Miller's Creek is having trouble with some bikers. Different gang, same tactics. They're asking if you might have some advice. Marcus exchanges glances with Sarah and Lisa. There it is, the first ripple of change spreading outward. He remembers the faces of each Marine he trained over the years, how teaching them to defend themselves meant also teaching them to protect others. Now he sees the same principle at work on a larger scale. We'll need a system, he says finally, turning to face the room. A way to coordinate between communities, share information, respond to threats. Something legal, organized, but flexible enough to adapt. Lisa nods, her FBI training clicking into gear. I can help with that. Set up proper channels, make sure everything stays within the law. We're not vigilantes, we're citizens protecting our communities. And we'll need training programs, Sarah adds. Not just combat tactics, but surveillance, communication, legal procedures. Show people how to work with law enforcement, not around them. The door chimes as Stan enters, wiping his hands on his apron. Got about 20 people out there ready to help rebuild, he reports. And not just locals. Got truckers from 3 different companies, veterans from 2 counties over. Words spreading fast. Marcus looks down at his coffee cup, seeing his reflection in the dark liquid. The man looking back isn't just a retired Marine anymore. He's become something else, a symbol, a catalyst, a leader in a fight he never sought but can't walk away from. You know what this means, he says to the room. If we do this, if we really commit to helping other communities stand up to organized crime, we're painting targets on ourselves. The outcasts were just the beginning. Other gangs, bigger organizations, they'll see us as a threat. Sarah's hand finds his shoulder, squeezing gently. Good, she says firmly. Let them come. Let them see what happens when they push good people too far. Through the window, the morning sun finally breaks free of the horizon, flooding the diner with golden light. Outside, the community gathers, ready to rebuild not just a building, but something larger, a network of resistance, a chain of communities united against those who would prey on them. Marcus straightens, feeling the weight of his decisions settle into place. He's not just defending a diner anymore. He's helping forge a shield that will protect thousands of similar places across the country. It's a mission bigger than himself, bigger than any one community, but it starts here with a cup of coffee and a simple choice to stand up. All right, he says, his voice carrying the quiet authority that has guided countless Marines through their darkest moments. Let's get to work. 3 weeks after the raid, the Crossroads Diner hums with an energy that feels both familiar and fundamentally changed. The regular customers are back, but now they sit with purpose, their phones linked to a secure network that monitors gang activity across 3 states. Veterans and truckers share tables with FBI analysts, tracking patterns of movement along the highways. Marcus notices the change first, a sudden silence in the chatter of radio frequencies that usually crackle with trucker communications. Sarah picks up on it too, her hand instinctively checking her concealed holster. Multiple channels just went dark. Pete's voice reports through their earpieces. Everything from Miller's Creek to the state line. Lisa bursts through the door, her FBI jacket dusty from the road. They're coming, she announces without preamble. All of them. Not just the outcasts, they've allied with 3 other gangs. Our sources count over 200 bikes moving this way. Marcus remains at his usual spot at the counter, but his posture shifts subtly. They finally figured it out, he says quietly. This isn't about revenge anymore. They're trying to cut off the head of the resistance before it grows too strong. Through the windows, the sunset paints the sky in shades of blood red. The diner's parking lot, seemingly empty, conceals dozens of defenders in carefully planned positions. Reinforced plates have been subtly installed in the walls, and bulletproof glass now gleams behind the vintage window frames. State police are being blocked by accidents on every major road, Lisa reports, checking her phone. Clever. They've coordinated this better than we expected. Not better enough, Sarah counters, bringing up a satellite view on her tablet. Our people are already in position. Has everyone cleared the evacuation zone? Marcus nods. Betty and the civilians are safe. The only people left within 5 miles are here by choice. He looks around the diner at the gathered faces, veterans, law enforcement, and community members who've trained for this moment. Time to see if all our preparation pays off. The first rumble of motorcycles echoes in the distance, growing steadily louder. Not the usual scattered approach of a normal gang, but the coordinated thunder of an army on the move. Through the gathering dusk, headlights appear on every approach road, a noose of steel and chrome tightening around the diner. Engines roar in the gathering darkness as bikes form a circle around the diner, 3 deep in some places. Their headlights create a ring of harsh illumination, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Behind them, pickup trucks and vans take up tactical positions. These aren't just angry bikers anymore, but a coordinated assault force. I count 237 bikes. Sarah's voice comes through the radio, calm and professional. plus 12 support vehicles. Heavy weapons visible. They're not trying to hide their intentions. Marcus watches through the window as 4 figures dismount and approach the diner. He recognizes the outcast's leader, now sporting a metal brace on the shoulder Marcus had wrenched. With him are 3 other men, leaders of allied gangs, each carrying the weight of their reputation in their stride. All teams hold positions. Marcus broadcasts quietly. Remember the plan. Let them make the first move. The bell chimes as the 4 men enter. The diner appears nearly empty, just Marcus at his usual spot, a few scattered customers in booths, and Sarah behind the counter, where Betty usually stands. "Nice setup you got here," the outcast leader says, his voice carrying none of its previous bravado. "This is all business now. Reinforced walls, bulletproof glass, strategic firing positions. Almost like you were expecting trouble." Marcus takes a deliberate sip of his coffee. Just being careful. Dangerous times on the interstate these days. One of the other leaders steps forward, a tall man with a scarred face and cold eyes. "Let's skip the games. You've become a problem. Not just here, but everywhere. Every town with a diner or truck stop suddenly thinks they can stand up to us. Our people are being watched, reported, arrested." "Sounds rough," Marcus replies evenly. "Must be hard, not being able to terrorize innocent people anymore." "This ends tonight," the 3rd leader declares. "We're going to burn this place to the ground, make an example of everyone inside. Show every other community what happens when they get brave." The 4th man, who hasn't spoken yet, pulls out a phone. "In about 10 minutes, we're hitting 3 other locations just like this, places where people tried to follow your example. By morning, nobody will dare stand against us again." Marcus stands slowly, his movements deliberate. "You still don't get it, do you?" He gestures to the window, where the bikes gleam in the darkness. "You brought your whole operation here. All your leaders, all your heaviest hitters, left your other territories exposed." His smile is razor-thin, just like we planned. The gang leader's confidence wavers as Marcus's words sink in. Above them, the distant thrum of helicopter rotors becomes audible. Through the windows, figures emerge from the shadows of the parking lot. Dozens of armed law enforcement officers, veterans, and federal agents, all moving with practiced precision. "Right now," Marcus continues, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "joint task forces are moving on every major operation you left undefended. Storage facilities, distribution centers, safe houses, all the places you couldn't afford to empty out for this show of force." Lisa's voice comes through everyone's earpiece. FBI teams breaching target locations in 3, 2, 1. The scarred leader's phone erupts with notifications. His face contorts with rage as he reads message after message about simultaneous raids across 3 states. "You son of a..." "We've been tracking your movements for weeks," Marcus interrupts. "Cataloging your responses, studying your patterns. You're predictable. Push you hard enough in one spot, and you'll gather everything you have for a show of force. Leave everything else exposed." Sarah moves from behind the counter, her weapon now visible. The customers in the booth stand, revealing themselves as veteran operators. Outside, the circle of bikes is now surrounded by a larger circle of law enforcement. "Your choice," Marcus says calmly. "Surrender now, or we do this the hard way. Either way, your operations end tonight." The outcast's leader draws a concealed weapon with lightning speed, but Marcus is faster. The movement that disarms him is almost too quick to follow, a blur of precision born from decades of training. The gun skitters across the floor as the leader finds himself once again pinned against the counter. The other gang leaders reach for their weapons, but freeze as red lasers appear on their chests. Sarah's team, positioned in the surrounding buildings, has them dead to rights. "You know what your mistake was?" Marcus asks, maintaining the hold with practiced ease. "You thought fear was power, but real power." He nods toward the window, where hundreds of citizens, truckers, veterans, ordinary people who've had enough, stand shoulder to shoulder with law enforcement. Real power is communities standing together. And once they learn how, they never forget. Through their earpieces comes a cascade of reports. FBI Team 1, target secured. DEA Task Force, warehouse cleared. State Police, suspects in custody. Location after location, the gang's entire infrastructure falling like dominoes. The scarred leader slumps in defeat as the reality of their situation becomes clear. They haven't just lost a battle, they've lost everything. Their entire network, methodically dismantled in a single, coordinated operation. Cuff them, Marcus orders, releasing his hold. As law enforcement moves in, he returns to his coffee cup, his movements as calm and deliberate as ever. Outside, the night erupts with activity as hundreds of gang members are systematically taken into custody. The operation continues with military precision, each element falling into place exactly as planned. Sarah joins him at the counter, holstering her weapon. You knew they'd come in force. Knew they'd try to make an example of us. Marcus nods, watching as the gang leaders are led away. Some lessons you learn in combat. The bigger they come at you, the more they leave exposed. All we had to do was make them angry enough to forget that. Dawn breaks over the Crossroads Diner, painting the sky in triumphant shades of gold and blue. The parking lot has transformed into a staging area for law enforcement, with dozens of confiscated bikes lined up in neat rows. FBI evidence teams work methodically, documenting everything while state police process a steady stream of arrested gang members. Marcus stands in the doorway, watching as the last transport vehicle pulls away. Lisa approaches with a tablet, scrolling through preliminary reports. Final numbers coming in, she says. 283 arrests across 4 states. 37 locations raided. Seized enough weapons and contraband to put most of them away for decades. And the other communities? Marcus asks, thinking of the diners and truck stops that had followed their example. Sarah joins them, cleaning her glasses with methodical precision. All secured. The gangs thought they could hit multiple targets at once, but they didn't realize each location was as prepared as we were. Their coordinated attack turned into a coordinated surrender. Through the morning mist, vehicles begin arriving. Not law enforcement this time, but ordinary citizens. Betty's car pulls up first, followed by a stream of regulars. They move with purpose, carrying cleaning supplies, tools, coffee makers. The diner might have been a battlefield hours ago, but now it's time to reclaim it. You know what happens next? Lisa says, watching the gathering crowd. Other gangs will see this as an opportunity to move in, try to fill the power vacuum. Marcus nods, but there's a hint of satisfaction in his expression. Let them try. Every community they target now knows 2 things, how to fight back and that they're not alone. He gestures to where Mike the trucker is setting up a new communications hub in his rig, coordinating with similar setups across the country. The networks we built, the training we provided, the connections between communities, that doesn't go away just because one threat is neutralized. A young biker, barely out of his teens, is being led to a transport vehicle when he catches Marcus's eye. They said you were just some washed-up veteran. The kid says, a mix of awe and regret in his voice. But you were building an army all along, weren't you? Not an army, Marcus corrects him. A community. Armies conquer. Communities protect. The morning light strengthens, glinting off the chrome of confiscated motorcycles and the badges of law enforcement officers. Inside the diner, Betty is already brewing fresh coffee as regulars begin putting the place back in order. The bullet-resistant windows catch the sunlight, nearly invisible but ever-present, like the network of protection that now spans the highways. Sarah checks her phone, scrolling through messages. Getting calls from other towns already. They want to know how to set up their own networks, how to coordinate with law enforcement, how to protect their own. Marcus takes a last look at the scene, the mix of civilians and professionals working together, the transformed parking lot, the dawn of a new era for communities along the interstate. Then I guess, he says, turning back toward his usual spot at the counter, we better show them how it's done. 1 month after the raid, the Crossroads Diner has become something more than just a restaurant. The casual observer might notice the subtle changes first, the truckers who sit in booths with laptops, coordinating route security, The veterans who stop by not just for coffee, but to attend training sessions in the back room. The wall of photos showing similar diners and truck stops across the country, each one a node in a growing network of protected communities. Marcus still takes his usual spot at the counter each evening, but now his coffee breaks are punctuated by video calls with other communities, sharing strategies and intelligence. The diner's back office has been converted into a coordination center, where Betty balances managing the restaurant with helping organize a nationwide communication network. Another success in Oklahoma, Sarah reports, sliding onto the stool next to Marcus. Local truckers spotted a new gang trying to move in, coordinated with law enforcement before anything could escalate. Didn't even need our direct involvement. Marcus nods, a quiet satisfaction in his eyes. That's how it should be. Communities protecting themselves, supporting each other. We just showed them it was possible. Through the window, he watches a group of young veterans teaching self-defense classes in the parking lot. Local business owners, waitresses, and truckers learn alongside each other, building not just skills but connections. The fear that once permeated these highways has been replaced by something stronger, solidarity. Lisa arrives with fresh reports, her FBI jacket now bearing signs of frequent travel. The pattern's spreading, she says, spreading maps across the counter. Every time a gang tries to establish new territory, they find the local communities already organized, already resistant. They can't get a foothold anymore. The bell chimes as Mike enters, his tablet displaying a complex network of routes and checkpoints. Got reports of suspicious activity near the state line, he says. Already coordinated with 3 truck stops and 2 diners in the area. State police are monitoring, but the community response teams are ready if needed. The diner's evening rush brings a new kind of energy. Truckers sharing intelligence over pie, veterans mentoring community members, law enforcement officers breaking bread with local citizens. The barriers that once existed between these groups have dissolved, replaced by a shared purpose. Betty approaches Marcus with a fresh pot of coffee and a knowing smile. "Remember when I used to jump at every motorcycle sound?" she asks, filling his cup. "Now I can tell from the engine noise whether it's trouble or just customers." The transformation isn't just in the people, it's in the place itself. The reinforced windows and walls remain, but they're now complemented by state-of-the-art communication equipment, donated by grateful technology companies who'd lost too many shipments to highway gangs. The parking lot, once just a patch of asphalt, has become a training ground and community gathering space. Sarah reviews security footage on her tablet, noting the subtle changes in how people carry themselves. It's not just about physical security anymore, she observes. These communities have found their voice. Did you see the legislation they're pushing through? New protocols for highway patrol, better coordination between jurisdictions, community oversight committees. Marcus watches a group of teenage waitresses from a nearby truck stop practicing defensive techniques with a former force recon operator. Their laughter carries through the evening air, but their movements show growing confidence. "That's the real victory," he says quietly. Not just teaching them to defend themselves, but showing them they never had to be victims in the first place. Lisa joins them, fresh from testifying before a congressional committee about the new community-based security model. Other countries are starting to take notice, she reports. Got inquiries from 3 continents about implementing similar programs. They're calling it the Crossroads Protocol, community empowerment backed by professional support and legal framework. Through the window, the sunset paints the sky in familiar colors, but the view has changed. Where once there was isolation and vulnerability, now there's a steady stream of activity. Community patrols checking in, training sessions wrapping up, information being shared across a network that spans thousands of miles. A young trucker approaches Marcus, nervousness warring with determination on her face. "Sir," she begins, "our stop in Arizona, we want to set up something like this. Already got some veterans on board, started talking to local law enforcement. Would you help us get started?" Marcus shares a look with Sarah and Lisa, seeing in their eyes the same recognition. This was never just about one diner or one community. It was about changing how people saw themselves and their power to resist intimidation. The next morning brings a different kind of gathering to the Crossroads Diner. Representatives from truck stops and diners across 3 states sit in the booths, sharing experiences and strategies. The back room has become a classroom where Sarah leads a briefing on coordinating with law enforcement, while Lisa explains the legal framework that keeps their network on the right side of the law. Marcus moves among them, listening more than speaking. He sees the owner of a small Arizona truck stop deep in conversation with a Missouri state trooper about response times. A group of waitresses from Kansas compare notes with veterans about security camera placement. The divisions that once separated these communities have melted away, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. "You've started something remarkable," a voice says behind him. Marcus turns to find Judge Peterson, who'd helped create the legal framework for their community defense network. "When I first heard about civilians and law enforcement working together like this, I was skeptical. But seeing it in action, it was always there," Marcus responds, watching Betty train a new waitress on both coffee service and the security alert system. People just needed to know they had the right to stand up for themselves and the support to do it effectively. Through the windows, Marcus can see the highway stretching into the distance. The same road that once brought danger now carries a constant stream of allies, truckers, veterans, community members, all connected by a network of mutual support. The gangs haven't disappeared entirely, but they've lost their grip on the interstate, forced to confront communities that refuse to be intimidated. Mike enters with his latest network update. "Got reports of suspicious activity near Miller's Creek," he announces. "But watch this." He pulls up a screen showing real-time responses, local police increasing patrols, truckers adjusting routes to provide additional eyes, nearby diners heightening their alertness. The system works seamlessly, without direct intervention from Marcus or his team. "That's what success looks like," Sarah says softly, joining them. "Not us solving every problem, but communities knowing how to protect themselves." A familiar rumble of motorcycle sounds from the parking lot, but no one flinches anymore. Instead, heads turn with curiosity rather than fear. Through the window, Marcus watches as a group of veteran bikers arrives, part of a new network of volunteer escorts for trucks carrying valuable or sensitive cargo. The contrast isn't lost on him, how the very sound that once meant danger now often signals protection. It's just one of many transformations he's witnessed since that first confrontation with the outcasts. As evening settles over the Crossroads Diner, Marcus takes his usual spot at the counter. But something's different. The coffee cup before him is new, a gift from the community, engraved with the Marine Corps emblem and the words "Strength through Unity." Betty sets a fresh pot beside him, her movements confident and assured, a far cry from the fearful woman who once jumped at every shadow. "Sometimes I wonder," she says, leaning on the counter, "what would have happened if you hadn't been here that first night? If you'd chosen any other diner for your coffee?" Marcus considers this as he watches the evening unfold. Through the windows, he sees a truck stop for the night, its driver greeted by a veteran escort team. Inside, the booths are filled with a mix of travelers and locals, all part of a network that spans the nation's highways. The fear that once haunted these places has been replaced by something powerful, a sense of community that transcends boundaries and backgrounds. Sarah approaches with a tablet showing the latest statistics. Highway crime rates have plummeted. Gang activity along major trucking routes has dropped to historic lows. But more importantly, community engagement has soared. People aren't just surviving anymore, they're thriving. "You know what the real change is?" Lisa adds, joining them with her own coffee. "It's not the security systems or the training programs. It's how people carry themselves now. They walk taller, look you in the eye. They know they're not alone anymore." The diner's door chimes, and a group of truckers enters, nodding respectfully to Marcus. Among them is a familiar face, the young biker who'd questioned him during the final confrontation. Now, he wears a different kind of leather jacket, marked with the emblem of the Highway Safety Patrol. Redemption comes in many forms, Marcus observes quietly, watching the former gang member share intelligence about route security with his fellow truckers. As night falls, the diner glows like a beacon along the interstate. Through the windows, Marcus can see similar lights dotting the highway, other diners, truck stops, and gathering places, each one a fortress of community strength. The roads that once belonged to predators now serve as connections between allies. You haven't been back to your old spot by the coast, Sarah notes. Still planning to return someday? Marcus looks around at what the Crossroads Diner has become, not just a restaurant, but a symbol of what people can achieve when they stand together. He thinks of all the other communities following their example, all the lives changed, all the highways made safer. Some coffees, he says finally, lifting his engraved cup, taste better because of the company you share them with. Outside, the interstate stretches endlessly in both directions, but it's no longer a path of fear. Instead, it's become a connection between communities that have learned to protect their own, support each other, and stand strong against any threat. And at the heart of it all, a simple diner where one man's stand against intimidation sparked a movement that would change the highways forever. Betty refills his cup one last time as the night shift begins, and Marcus settles in to watch over the community he helped build, not as a protector anymore, but as a reminder of what ordinary people can achieve when they refuse to back down.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.